the durable skills piece, and that may be where you were leading into, Sylvester. But, when you look at a durable skills wheel from America Succeeds, and you've got, 100 different options, and I've shown that to employers, and I say, hey, next time you hire, which one of these skills do you want to hire for? And they look at it and they're like, well, all of them. Yep. Well, that's what we're looking at here. And I've had employers and companies say, okay, if you're teaching this stuff and they're coming out and being able to talk to me and come up and have build a relationship and connections and be able to take on again to building your networks and having those conversations, I'd hire them right now. I'll train them on all the technical stuff. And that's where we get lost is, and I've got 2 higher ed degrees and I've got a daughter in college.
You are listening to the Global CTE Podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE Podcast. I am Sylvester Chisom, your host. Now, this is the place where it is our desire to wrap a blanket of goodwill around the career and tech education community. I interview the best, the brightest, the movers, the shakers, and innovators. And today is no different. I have my good friend, Nate Clayberg, here with me today. Now, let me tell you about Nate. Nate is the business and industry director for the CAPS Network. With over 25 years in business and program development, Nate specializes in connecting economic development with education. Since July 2023, he's been instrumental in leading profession-based learning initiatives for the CAPS programs nationwide. He is known for his strategic leadership and operational expertise, focusing on growth and profitability. Beyond his professional role, Nate is a certified economic developer. He's also a seasoned sports broadcaster, having worked with ESPN3 for the Missouri Valley Conference and the Jayhawk Sports Network. Nate is also the host of That's a Job podcast. Join us now as we gain insights from Nate's extensive experience in shaping the future workforce. Nate, welcome to the show.
Welcome. I appreciate that, Sylvester. That was a lot. So I hope we have time to go through some more questions here. Took up a bunch of time with that intro.
Well, I think it's important to highlight the work of my guest and to show, like, listen, this is a serious person here. You should stay tuned in, because no doubt Nate is going to drop some gems on us all about economic development, education, workforce readiness, all of the fun stuff that our students need to have better experiences with from our teachers, right?
Well, as long as there's no pressure, Sylvester, I guess.
No. So listen, if you're tuning in, Nate is a good friend. We've spent some great times together. We were just at the Hatch conference in Omaha, Nebraska, at the Arbor Forums, and we spent a lot of time talking about ideas and the future of education. Nate and Corey, founder of CAP. So these are friends. These are friends here. So Nate, this should be easy, man.
Well, and you gave me some good coffee, so it was enticing to keep some things going here, Sylvester. Maybe there's more where that came from.
Dare I ask you, how was the coffee? Did you enjoy it? I've
gotten through one bag. It was excellent. It was good to have over Christmas to share that with family and friends.
I love it. Shout out to Show Me the World for that. So Nate, we did give an outstanding intro, but what's your origin story, man? Like, how do you get here?
It's a journey, and life should be a journey, even though, you've got your challenges along the way. And, I can compare it to, sometimes you travel by air or car, and you run into interruptions and cancellations or whatever. And that's just a part of it to overcome. And, I think back to what did I want to do as I came through? That was always kind of top of mind, I believe, with me. And I think it came early on when my parents split up when I was in 8th grade, and, kind of, if I wanted some things, I had to kind of go on my own for it and do some work and started working part-time jobs and things like that. So I started thinking about occupations, but I think back to the first thing that I wanted to be, Sylvester, was an astronaut. And I would watch space shuttle launches, things like that. I've got space shuttle pictures on my wall here behind me. And I went to space camp. Actually, a friend of mine, we raised some money and saved some money and went to Huntsville, Alabama. Got to go through, simulation missions and met a lot of cool people from across the country. And I remember sitting in that auditorium, and they said, if you want to follow this path on their way to aerospace or studying to be an astronaut, you need to keep math and science in the top of your mind. It's very important. And I said to myself, no, it's not for me. No. No. And at that point, my dreams of becoming an astronaut were dashed, but it was something that I was fully aware of. Okay, that's not something I want to do, and I hear students talk about wanting to go to law school or med school or wherever they want to be. And it's like, if it comes up that you're on your pathway to, become a veterinarian, have you thought through that you have to put animals down, or that there's some bad things you're going to see? And if you can't handle that, maybe it's time to look at something different. So you start seeing some self-reflection. But, as it went along, and I think I realized this a few years back, that my pathway after that was I wanted to get into broadcasting. And I think I enjoyed the piece of Space Camp where I had the headset on and we're in mission control, and we're going through that stuff. I think that was a foreshadow to me, putting the headset on for sports broadcasting. And I started doing that when I was 16 years of age. And I thought, this is my pathway. Went through, did a year at community college so I could get more on-air experience at the local radio station, and went on to Iowa State thinking, okay, journalism's the pathway. No one told me any different. Got a little concentration in business and started working full-time at a radio station in Boone, Iowa. Morning show, program director, sports director. I had it all, working 6-7 days a week, but I loved it. I was, turns out I was making peanuts and just getting by, but I sure loved it. Right. Right. But then fast forward, it's like, okay, that was the job that I thought I was going to get into. And then there's that job that I ended up in after I got married. I'm like, okay, how do I support us both? And we ended up moving across state. My wife was in grad school and sold photocopy machines, sold that radio advertising. And I thought, what am I doing? I got to figure out something I love. Where am I going? And okay, sports. I love sports. I was around it, and as a broadcaster, I thought, okay, I'm gonna get into that. And I found a pathway to get into that world is through grad school. So my wife's first job was in Richmond, Virginia. We moved out there. Ended up going to grad school at Virginia Commonwealth. Ended up going through their sport leadership program, and ended up back with the headset on, calling women's basketball and helping with some TV, and did a men's basketball game for VCU. And I thought, okay, we're on this pathway with college sports. And we moved back to Iowa, is where I'm at, Northeast Iowa, and was at the University of Northern Iowa, and got hired on there, moved my way up. I had a cool title of assistant athletic director for marketing. Wow, a title. And got to work. I had the opportunity to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and nights and weekends. And turns out that's not ideal, Sylvester, because that will wane on you and burn you out. And also, it's a very competitive industry because so many people want to do it, and there's only so many opportunities. They can. You're a big knowledge guy when it comes to supply and demand, so you can anticipate what I was getting paid with that. And new boss comes in, and him and I don't get along, and I'm out. And, it kind of devastated me because that was my identity. But, I picked myself up. I think this is where and we're going to talk, I think, a lot about networks, but as I was on my way home, and I had a half-hour commute home after that day, and I had 60 days to try and figure something out. But right away, I was on the phone looking for something. And what's out there. And I had created so many relationships and nurtured those during my time at Northern Iowa. And those are ones I still lean on today that I've been pretty proud of, that then rolled me into trying to figure out after that, what am I wired for? And I didn't know it until someone said, you should get into economic development. And I go, what are you talking about? I had to Google it. What is it? And turns out there was an opportunity in a rural economic development office. It was just me, but wow, building relationships, making connections, marketing, communications, some business operations pieces in there, being able to build a program, meet more people in my network circle, I call it. And that evolved from 4.5 years in that small office in Buchanan County, Iowa, to a regional group doing existing business, to then moving on my own to do some consulting, and then coming across this opportunity. Again, here's a connection. My old high school principal was the number 2 guy at the Cedar Falls, Iowa school district, reaches out to me, says, hey, we're going to start this program called CAPS. We want you to help make business connections for us. And I went, what's CAPS? And fast forward 7 years, here we are, 6.5 on the local level, and now a little over half a year at the national level. And I found work I'm wired for, Sylvester. It's helping kids make connections to figure out where they're going next, finding purpose, and helping to build communities still, and however you want to define communities. But that's how we're here, and it's fun to now do it at a national level and get to meet key advocates and allies like you.
Man, thank you for sharing such a rich journey. The way you answered that is exactly why I like to ask that question, because it's the starting points, right? It's like, where did you start to get here? And it's usually not a straight line. It's like
never is.
And some curves. I'm curious. Okay, the economic development part, I want to come back to that. But since you brought it up before we move too far, you said, what is CAPS? What is CAPS? So anybody first time listener or some, like, explain that so that we can level set on the ground floor here.
Well, I'll give shout out to Tim Lukey, who runs the STL CAPS program. I got to sport the gear he gave me when I was down there here recently. But CAPS stands for the Center for Advanced Professional Studies. And you've probably heard it if you've listened to this podcast. Sylvester's talked a lot about it and had some key people involved in it. But taking students outside the classroom, putting them in professional environments, working on real things is what I always say. So you're looking at it's not just simulations, but when we say profession-based learning with CAPS, it's client-connected learning. You're actually doing stuff that is connected and can have an impact with business. It all originated out of Overland Park, Kansas, Metro Kansas City, Blue Valley School District, and you're looking at that first program 14 years ago, I believe, and now we're at 104 with 3 outside the U.S., one outside of Toronto, one in Kuwait, one in Kenya. And they just keep evolving. I know we've got, I think, another 5 or 6 in the pipeline that we could be announcing here before mid-year, if not before that. But, it's one of those programs that students are engaged in that when parents hear it, they're like, my kid's going to be in that, or I wish my kid was in that, or I wish I would have had that. And that's thanks enough for where we're moving. And honestly, 14 years in, and I think it's 3 years of the CAPS network existing officially, we're just really getting started. There's some other opportunities to evolve into that we can continue to support the students that are out there that have been through it and are going to go through it.
Absolutely. And for me, it was, man, I wish I had that. That was like, if I could have received that level of real world, intentional exposure to career pathways, to industry professionals, the place-based learning, getting off the school campus and going on site to some other places and working on real projects. And like what you said earlier, building that network from age 15, 16, like right. You have these high-ranking professionals already on your side in your network. That's a special thing that you do. I want to go back to something because I think I'm curious your answer here. You said someone told you should be in economic development. What do you know? What did they see in Nate or in your career journey up to that point that made them say that?
That's interesting. And it was somebody who, I'd worked with in athletics. Actually, it was somebody I had worked, in athletics that brought it up, that heard about it and got me connected to somebody else. But I think it must have been, just, I guess, my broad base of experience. I've always dabbled in all sorts of things. And as a economic development practitioner, you're kind of dabbling in all sorts of different areas. That's a good question, Sylvester, because I think that's something that adults and even peers should do more of. Because a lot of times students and adults, for that matter, don't see opportunities that they can until somebody kind of presents it to them, right? Because you can lie to yourself saying, I'm not qualified for that, or, there's no way I can do that. But people are like, yeah, when someone says you're doing something, they said, oh, I can see you do that. You got to kind of follow that, and kind of see where it goes. But a lot of times, there's assumptions you make that I do want to be a veterinarian. But someone else might be like, but you don't really like cats, or I've seen you not be nice to dogs. So maybe that's not something for you, right? And I've been a part of the Cedar Falls, Iowa CAPS program up until I started with the CAPS network. So I've been boots on the ground. I've been in the classrooms. I've been, with the instructors and the students and things like that. And, you see it a lot. Students going down pathways that they probably shouldn't. And we're a little afraid, I think, sometimes as adults, we don't want to upset them. But in CAPS, you're not telling them, no, I don't see you as a vet. You're helping them discover that on their own by presenting them with opportunities and making connections. And CAPS gives you time to do that exploration.
I think that is so powerful and so important. Let me expose you to the things that you say you're interested in, or you have some level of curiosity around, and maybe you double down on it. Like you say, like, oh my goodness, yes, this is the best thing. I definitely want to be a vet. Or you say, like, I don't like, I may be bitten by a dog or something. Like while I'm doing work, I can't go for that. and you realize, well, this is not for me. Or I don't want to work with large farm animals, or, but you figure it, you're able to find a safe space with not an extraordinary level of time, commitment, and investment in, like, okay, you didn't find this out like 3 years into veterinarian school. Like, it's like, okay, I understand. Maybe let me find another career pathway. And I think that's great. It's like you find yourself in the work, or you find out this is not for you. And that's also a wonderful thing too.
Well, a lot of things I wonder, Sylvester, I don't know if I would have listened to myself, or if I would have listened to people. If I had taken CAPS, or someone said you should take it, because I would have certainly been one of those students that, oh, I already know what I want to do. I'm going to get into broadcasting, and this is my pathway. And I would have said, I don't need that. And we certainly is a lot of those. But when we say, yeah, it's, when you talk about CAPS, we always say, who's CAPS for? And it depends who you talk to. You're going to get someone that says, oh, CAPS is for kids that don't know what they want to do. Or CAPS is for students that do know what they want to do. Or CAPS is only for high flyers. Or CAPS is for the struggling student. And in reality, CAPS is for all of those. But bottom line, CAPS is for students who actually want to put in the work to broaden wherever their position is. If you're just showing up feeling like it's get out of jail time and I get to mess around and do whatever, things aren't going to go well for you. Mm-hmm. But, when we talk, you described, CAPS about what it is, and I talked about it. And I've had people say, oh, we've got that. It might be a career center, or we've got DECA or VICA or, co-op programs or internships. And we're like, no, it's not that. Mm-hmm. And you got students saying, well, that sounds very VOTEC, or that sounds very CTE. I'm college bound. I need to take AP. I need to take all these things. Yeah. Okay. If your goal is to get into college, and that's your main goal, that's your main focus, go right ahead. But the key thing I talk about on my Pathway to Purpose program that we really have developed in Iowa here, and trying to spread it more. Mm-hmm. Let's look at what's the step after you're done being a student. What are we working for there? And then let's reverse engineer that to see what research can you come across, what jobs are available, Who can you meet? Who can you get connected to? That's going to really help you with your ikigai, your Japanese pathway to purpose, your concept of being. That it's not just about passion. And students always get told you should do what you're passionate about. And I was passionate about broadcasting, and I still get to do it today, as you said in the intro. But I wasn't getting paid well enough to do it. And did the world really need it? I'll question that. But I feel like I'm there right now. And I think, Sylvester, you're probably in the same boat. And we just want to help other people find that. Yeah,
I can't help. This episode is totally, it's about you and your journey. But I have a degree in biology from Ohio State. I was planning to be a dentist.
The Ohio State.
Yes, I didn't want to, I didn't want to showboat here, but yes, the Ohio State University. And my thoughts were to be a dentist. And I realized I didn't want to work with people in that way. Like, and that's
sticking your fingers in somebody's mouth. You were not interested in that. No.
I thought I did. I really thought I did. But I think it's interesting now. So my heart is as a business person, as an entrepreneur, and education. And I live at that intersection of business and education, right? But I wonder, I have a friend. This is where I kind of reflect. I'm like, what if I had this kind of exposure earlier? I have a friend who has a PhD from WashU in St. Louis, and works in biotech, but also has a degree in biology. And she works at a biotech startup. That was never introduced to me. That did not come across my radar, that was an opportunity to say, well, how could you compare your entrepreneurial ambitions and science together? I never met a Jennifer, like a Corbion, like that sort of thing, to see like, oh, I could be making ice cream flavors or doing something interesting in that way. And I think that's where I'm kind of ranting a little bit, but I think that the experience of the education, the exposure, man, it's both. So the kids are saying, oh, I'm just need to go to college. It's like, well, if we can show you some things prior to that, then you'll be that much more savvy along your journey post-secondary.
Yeah, we make assumptions. I think there was a stat that came out. I'll give credit to Ethan Weekman from the Cedar Falls CAPS program that gave this to me, and I'll have to dig it up, but it's out there. We're looking at 2035, which is, 11 years from now. 70%, I think was the number. 70% of the jobs then don't exist today. And, you're trying to set yourself up as a high school student on this pathway to get to college to do a job. I paused on that because I think a lot of times we're not thinking about what job we're trying to get. We just are trying to get into that college. I think a lot of times we're not even thinking about what are we majoring in. We're just going to go into biology, right, Sylvester? Or we're just going to go into psychology or major in business or engineering. And, my favorite one, engineering, is when I ask a kid, well, what kind of engineering? And they look at you and you're like, okay, all right. But I don't want to make fun of them. It's like, okay, we got some work to do. And we're going to try and narrow that focus into what that is. But, the opportunity is there to be a part of evolving what education is. And what is that box in education that we can move the needle on? And, I'm from outside education, just like you. And I think it was going into my third semester, between my second and third semester of being involved in a CAPS program. And you leave that second semester, that it was a fall semester. I'm like, wow, there's some good things going. These kids have done some awesome stuff. January rolls around, whole new crop rolls in. And we're like, oh no, we got to start over. And it was at that point I said, this is why education struggles to change, because the customer is always changing. So that's why you have systems. That's why you have these frameworks. That's why you have to do that. And you can blame teachers for not wanting to change, but their customer's always changing, and it takes that extra work that we don't give educators enough time. They have the summers off, they get random PD days to try and just keep their head above water, not necessarily trying to make changes. And that's where CAPS comes in to offer that support, offer those frameworks to try and evolve some things. So there was a lot. I think I'm not sure I maybe answered your question exactly from what you asked it, but maybe that themes where we're at, Sylvester.
No, totally. I think reflecting on what you said is it's like it's a both and. You need the systems to make the education machine function, but how do we innovate and make sure that we're clear on what our customer needs, right? That student that we're trying to prepare for success in the workforce, but they need that exposure. They don't know what they don't know. So how do you find how do you I want to talk on that part, because you are the business and industry director, right? So how are you working to save educators time by introducing industry into the classroom? Like talk to me more about that part.
Well, it's like sometimes I call myself that translator between education and industry, right? There's two different worlds. If you're in the upper Midwest, it's it snows one day, school stops, but business keeps going. One works 9 months out of a year, one works 12, and they don't really understand each other too much. And we can tell, and this is you can blame teachers or whoever all you want, but they were never trained to reach out and engage in business and make those connections, let alone, and this is where we're trying to advance some things with the CAPS network, let alone know how to work with them and how to advance that into education, right? So you don't learn that at a teacher ed program is, profession-based learning or work-based learning or project-based learning. You don't get that. You might get it in a PD webinar or something down the line unless you're really focused in on it. But, the key thing we're looking at right now is, or I will say on the local level, in working with businesses, trying to engage with schools, and we'll hear, we just don't know what businesses to work with. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, are the students, do they have parents? Do you suppose those parents, majority are probably employed or maybe own a business? Start there. Mm-hmm. Just do some outreach, trying to see what's out there to talk about how you can do that, because businesses are itching to get in the door and try and figure it out. But I will caution people looking at how to do this. There are businesses that I will say are more, lack of a better term, predatory, that are coming in to just want to talk about their business and why you should come work for them. And here's the pathway and all that stuff. And that's not what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just give you a stage to talk about your company. But there's the 3 Ps that I get into when we're talking about business and industry. And this is been doing this on the local level. Now we're trying to expand it on the national level, and with companies like Black & Veatch and companies like HCA Healthcare and Corbion and, all sorts of ones that are out there that we're working with. Mm-hmm. Did you say, Nate? P,
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Did I hear you correct? You said there are 3 Ps.
3 Ps. I work on people. Okay. So the easiest thing to get in is, how do we get that companies or organizations, people engaged in your program? Sitting on panels, doing mock interviews, coming to events. That's your exposure piece. That's your lead in. That's your loss leader, or whatever you want to call it, from the business end of things. That gets them in the door. They see what this is. And then you get into the next one, it's professions. So, what does a Black & Veatch do? What does a Corbion do? What does an IDEX company do? Okay, let's talk about all these professions that are out there that people didn't know about. We talked earlier, offline on the food industry. You can just talk, you think farming, or you think distribution, or you think grocery stores, but, there's somebody that is trying to figure out, how do we get that grain from Cargill and Cedar Rapids to get processed into corn syrup, to then get implemented into Captain Crunch, that then is going to get put on the truck and get shipped, around the world, around the country. so everybody can enjoy their crunch berries. So, how does that work out? So let's showcase these professions that no one really knows are out there. And that's the key thing that really has an impact on local workforce retention and exposure. Even in you're in the St. Louis area, and I've talked to, a couple of our partners down there, our affiliates, and you start thinking of the maybe more popular brands of companies out there. You're thinking, I need to get this company or that company. And this is any city USA. But it's like, who are some of the small businesses, the 100 or less or 50 or less, or the mom and pops or the nonprofit groups or whatever. I tell the story about, and then, I guess I'd make it into that third P is a project.
Yeah. What's the
that
third
can lead into
project?
it. Yeah. Yeah. And this is where that organization, that company, this is where they get some skin in the game, is offering up a project or offering up a really designed work experience or immersion that you're really given that education piece now back. And when I talk about projects, and that can be the most complicated one for a company to process. And, I say it's number 8, 9, and 10. I'm a stack guy. There's other people that have lists. There's other ones that have Post-it notes. There's other ones that have them on their Trello board or wherever it's at. And it's stuff that just is always there. And what if you gave that to a CAPS associate or a student to work on? And, I had it before where someone would say, well, I've got this stack of business cards. I was just at a trade show and I'd like to get them put into a spreadsheet. I would say, no, I don't want it, because that's a task. But I would say, well, what are you going to do with that? Well, we're going to put it together. We're going to do a follow-up marketing piece based around this promotion we're going to do. And that's when I say, that's what I want. That's what I want. Give us that. We had a mom and pop bar and grill here in Jessup, Iowa, which is a town of 2,800 people, if that. And they wanted a kids menu. That was a CAPS program, the kids menu. And I remember the student saying, this is a horrible project. I said, is it really? I go, what happens if that family of 4 is taking their kids to the restaurant and they are kept busy with a kids menu? You feel like they're going to stay longer? Yes. Do you feel like mom and dad are going to maybe get an extra drink, maybe some dessert? Do you feel like they'll come back again? Yeah. I go, do you know how much money that means to that small business on returning customers, expanding your ticket? How much more that ticket's going to be at the end of the night? 8.5 by 11 piece of paper just maybe made that business another few $1,000s a month. I go, and that's real stuff that we don't stop long enough to think. There's things out there that companies have, organizations have, we both have, that I've offered up projects to our CAPS programs to work on because I just keep pushing it down the side. But now they're ramping it up. They moved it up to number 3, or they've even taken it all the way. And it's had a real impact on a business or organization or an individual. And that's something you can put on your resume. That's something you can talk about in your scholarship applications or your college admissions, or when it comes to having an interview. That's real value that's happening, mutual value, when you use those 3 Ps. And that's something we're working with Black and Veatch right now, who was the very first CAPS client in Blue Valley. And that was 14 years ago. And the challenge that they invested in the CAPS network, saying, we want our other offices. They have 87 offices across the country. We have 101 affiliates across the country, and there's overlap. So now we've created these partnerships between our programs in the St. Louis area and Black and Veatch, programs in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and Black and Veatch, offices in the Phoenix area with programs we have there. And now we're going to move into Dallas, move into Denver, and just kind of see where that goes. But we know we also have key affiliate partners in other locations that are working with national companies. And how can we then spread that out to, this company, Viking Pump in Cedar Falls, has had great experience with CAPS program. What about their other international locations they have across the country, if not around the world? Can we make those connections? And that's where I get my high, Sylvester, is all of a sudden I'm making a connection and you see that they're moving on something, that adds to it.
I feel like you're reading my notes here. because that was going to be my next question about you and relationship building. You are a master networker. I have seen you in action. And I'm curious, someone who's listening to what you just said, and they're like, yeah, that's easy for you, Nate, because you don't mind doing the outreach. Let's go tactical here. Give me maybe 3 of your best outreach tips to include business or industry into a school program or bring them onto a district. What do you have?
Well, that's a challenging one because it depends on your atmosphere, right? Depends where you're at. Right. Depends. Are you hanging out in the lounge or are you hanging out at a chamber networking event? But I think you've got to put yourself out there. And I'm extroverted, but I found as I've gotten a little older here, I've reverted back to some some introvertedism, if that's a word. But you got to put yourself out there and just and I don't like the question of, so what do you do? In a networking piece, but it's like, hey, what problem are you trying to solve? Or when you can kind of get a sense of if they're wearing a name tag and they're from somebody, I've been known to pull up my phone, see if I can find them on LinkedIn. Do we have a common connection? Is there something there that I can just come in and drop a nugget in? Right. There's some pre-research that you can have time to, and sometimes you don't. But I guess bottom line, it's just having the conversation. I think that one of our educators in our program here in Iowa, she just started talking about this new job she got with her neighbors. And it turns out 2 or 3 of them own businesses or involved in something. But it's like when someone starts talking about what do you do, it's you got to be ready to, what's an ask? And that's where I really continue on is if you're talking to somebody and somebody is asking about what you're doing or what your role is, and they said if they said, and this is always my favorite, well, let me know if you need something. We all hear that. Let me know if you need something. Okay. Well, who can you introduce me to that I can get connected more to some students? What's there's an ask.
So getting clear
on an ask
on your ask that will help you is important. So you have an answer to that.
Yeah. And you want to have an avenue too, and this is something we're still trying to build, and I need to do it probably more on a national level, but what's the avenue for somebody to try and also submit something or do outreach on? You can have the conversation, but how do I submit a project? How do I connect with you? Have that ready as well. And it's more interesting now in the world of reduced business cards. And Sylvester, I don't know, you were just coming back from a conference, people handing out business cards, or it's digital business cards, or it's just follow up, but you got to have those mechanisms in place too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm finding it's funny that you brought that. Let's bring it down to that level. I think there's still a lot of value in the business card. It's a bit of both. And you have some people now who are like, oh, scan this, or just follow me on LinkedIn, or let me just take your information. And then there are others who are still passing out business cards. But I think it is important to try to find a way to cut through all of that, like at a conference, to be memorable. Like, well, how I have because I literally do. I have a stack of business cards over here.
Sounds like a CAPS project, as long as you're going to do something with that.
But the success is in the follow-up. That is, the success is in the follow-up. But yeah, I think that's important, having that business card. Networking. You kind of just hit on that. I'm curious, what are you, how do we try to work with our students, our young people, to help them become better networkers, especially the in-person communication components, when they're like living in that phone. So I'm curious your thoughts on that part.
It's interesting. I think this generation probably has more interaction or more communication activity than we possibly could have ever had dating back, right? Because they can do it so instantaneously. Is it purposeful? I guess we could question that. But, that's where it comes back to, especially in CAPS. And do all our programs do it? I can say there's a fair amount that, we're asking students to go to do things they've never been asked to do, to connect with the business, to work on a project, to do things on their own. And a lot of times, failure is the biggest educator. And how do we set them up to reduce that? We've got to do onboarding. Again, we're asking them to do things they've never been asked to do. And, send an email. And it was monumental to me, Sylvester, when I had was part of my first cohort, Cedar Falls. Somebody says, what do I put in the subject line? And I went, oh, okay. I just do that automatically, but you've never been asked to do that. And I had this conversation with some school people last week. There's Google Classroom, there's Infinite Campus, there's Zello, there's all these things out there that we communicate with our students and our families with. And then we get mad they didn't check their email. Well, that's not where their information is. It's in these other systems, which then is probably adjacent to what a Slack is or a GroupMe or some of those things out there or Basecamp. But, the foundations for email, I think, will continue to exist for decades to come. We still get mail. We still got to figure that out. Mm-hmm. So, what does that mean? Or even having the handshake. You talk about teach them a handshake. Well, okay. Well, there's something about a handshake that just kind of opens you up and connects you to somebody, and be able to have the communication back and forth like we're having here on a Zoom call or in person or sitting down and doing a discovery meeting with a client for a project, or even a career discovery meeting. Those are things that, in our Iowa programs, we do that onboarding, because I think early on when we did it, it was like, okay, we're sending them out to fight a battle that we never trained them for, and shame on us. So as a whole, we need to do that, because we need to make sure these students are ready for what their next steps are, not just graduate them on the core competencies that our state requires or our school boards require or our teachers say. Well, we need to listen to what the world is saying and what is needed and the challenges we hear there. And it goes back to the durable skills piece, and that may be where you're leading into, Sylvester. But, when you look at that durable skills wheel from America Succeeds, and you've got 100 different options. And I've shown that to employers, and I say, hey, next time you hire, which one of these skills do you want to hire for? And they look at it and they're like, well, all of them. Yep. Well, that's what we're looking at here. And I've had employers and companies say, okay, if you're teaching this stuff and they're coming out being able to talk to me and come up and have build a relationship and connections and be able to take on again to building your networks and having those conversations, I'd hire them right now. I'll train them on all the technical stuff. And that's where we get lost is, and I've got 2 higher ed degrees, and I've got a daughter in college, and I want my son to go to college, but is that what he should do? I think my wife and I still kind of debate on what is that pathway. But why? If we're trying to get to a point that, there's some training coming out of colleges and higher ed that companies are having to erase from your mind and retrain it because it's not what they want, especially when you get into computer science, when you get into some other business acumen or even entrepreneurial thinking, that type of thing. It comes down to that training and the durable skills. The foundation for everything we're doing is comes back to the durable skills.
It really does. And I like how you really outlined communication on all the different levels. So the face-to-face, the importance of handshake, look them in the eye. How do you introduce yourself? To the subject line on the email. Those are all things that you're right. We need to be intentional about the onboarding. And that is one of the top durable skills employers are looking for is communication. And
because we can complain about, these students should know these things. And I say, well, when would they have learned it? Yeah. When would they have learned it? Or they can't even make a phone call. Okay. When would they have to? You probably still make your child's dentist appointment, don't you? And they're 18 or 22 or worst case, 25. You're probably still making your kid's doctor's appointment, aren't you?
Nate, stop. Nate, you have to stop. You're making someone feel really
on a
bad right now,
Sylvester.
Like, everyone's reflecting like, you know what? That next appointment, you're gonna call, make your own appointment.
Yeah. But did I still have to wake up my 17-year-old today to get him to school? Yeah, but I didn't drive him to school. I didn't walk him in the building.
Yeah.
You know, he's still got to figure out what he's going to wear and if he's going to brush his teeth or not.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know,
but it's those
little
other
things along the way.
other parts. It's the other parts. It's like you'll release the control over his or her outfit, but let them call and make their doctor's appointment, or, you know, create the calendar invites, or send the email and talk about the proper, yes, that's an adult and you know her first name is Mary, but that's not appropriate for you to say, hey, Mary, like miss something.
Sup, Mary, sup, you know? And here's a side note. If you're a parent out there and your kid wakes up late and gets to school, do not call the school. Do not call them in. Just let them, you know, they made their bed, but they probably didn't make it because they woke up late. You know, they, you know, just let them, you know, that's how you learn. Failure, failure is almost sometimes the best educator.
It can be, absolutely. And helping them to understand how to deal with the resilience required for those situations, or deal with maybe the small negative consequences that could come with that, and address it yourself straight on.
I would say, you know what they call it, WD-40? They said, well, because it was the 40th version of what they tried to make. So it's WD-40, you know, or you can go down the line. You can talk to Edison, the light bulb. You can talk to all sorts of these things that are out there that just happen. You know, the Post-it note was a positive failure. So it's I
didn't know that.
That was my tangent. That was my tangent for.
But it was a great one. I'm gonna have to send that one to our friends at America Succeeds. You're 17-year-old. You're 25-year-old. You're still making their doctor's appointment.
Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, that's
all
why
right. This will be on LinkedIn. Hopefully, this is the clip you put on LinkedIn. Sylvester, and we can get all the comments down below.
Oh, most certainly I will. Okay, so listen, last question. I'll let you get out of here. I asked everyone this. It's more about future oriented. What's your vision for the future of career tech education?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it might need to be, volume 2 of this episode. But, you know, I see why there's different. Every state has a little bit different based on how many different areas, if it's business or industrial tech or FCS, or you can go down the line, or medical, or whatever it is, or human services. You know, I feel like the biggest thing I'll go on this one because I questioned this, because my daughter, who's now a junior at the University of North Iowa, her initial thing, she wanted to be a business teacher. Mm-hmm. She had a really good business teacher that was also her CAPS instructor at Jessup High School in Iowa. And that was a pathway she thought she wanted to be on. And that was, she was on that pathway for 2.5 weeks. And then she said, no, this isn't for me. But when we had the conversation before that, I was like, what is the future of business ed within the CTE realm? Because I always say, if you are interested in, I'll get students and they say, I want to be in business. And I'll be like, well, what does that mean? Or people will say, you know, I don't need to take business classes if they're going to be a nurse, if they're going to be a lawyer, or they're going to be, you name it. I'm like, if you're going to get a paycheck from somebody, you're in business. And you need to have a sense of what a profit and loss statement looks like. You need to have a sense of how to control expenses, of how to sell, those things. I'd like to see this evolve. Business probably shouldn't be its own CTE section, but it should be more embedded in all the other CTE pieces or strands or whatever you want to call it. You know, because if you're looking at a metal shop class in school, okay, well, let's plan out what could we design, what could we make? Let's start costing it, because we want to try and sell these as a fundraiser for their program or whatever. Somebody's got to come up with the marketing plan. Someone's got to look at costing of materials and profit margins and things like that. Because if you're on a shop floor, if you're on anywhere, costs always come in, right? People get fired because we got to cut costs, or we're going to grow because, we'd add more sales. Those are things that those other areas of CTE should probably pay a little more attention to. And I know you do this probably with the group of kids you're working with your food ideas and your food products.
Show Me the World project.
Yeah. Show me where you're like, okay, coffee costs this, packaging costs this, shipping costs this. What should we price it at so we can actually keep doing this, right?
Yeah.
You can't break even on it.
No, you're 100% right. That's one of the things I truly believe that business education or entrepreneurship it helps elevate the learning experience in any other content segment. So really attaching it to a photography class. Now we're not just taking pictures. We have a studio, or we're selling these, or we're taking pictures of dogs, or we even have some schools that use our entrepreneurship curriculum in the welding class, and they're making fire pits, right? And they're doing all those things. Like you said, now we're touching business, math, and it helps to make the learning experience more experiential,
You probably do some research on what would a good item be. If you're in a pottery class and you decide, hey, we're going to sell ashtrays. Okay, is that a good idea in today's world? Maybe not. Maybe we explore something else out there and what we need to get into.
Yeah, or you know what? Choice and voice. Give it back to the kids. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
What do you all think research. We should do? 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And then now I thought this was a pottery class, but no, it's evolved into this interdisciplinary thing that's exciting, man.
Yeah. Well, that's where I want to see CTE go. That's where I
love it, Nate.
More integration.
I love it. So as I close out, Nate, if someone wants to reach out to you to bring you in for a PD session, or they want to learn more about college and career navigation, or they want to sign up for the CAPS program or work with the CAPS, where should they go?
I guess, CAPS initially, yourcapsnetwork.org to learn more about CAPS, and all the programs are out there. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn, Nate Clayberg, connect with me there. I've got a website too that I do my college and career navigation support piece with, nateclayberg.com. So those are all there. And as I'm sure Sylvester will say, it's also in the show notes.
Absolutely. In the show notes. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Nate, thank you for being an outstanding guest and sharing gems. You totally did not disappoint, and I knew you would not. If you enjoyed this episode, don't be selfish. Share it with a friend or a colleague who needs to hear this. And until the next episode, remember, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.